meeting in 2020.
Hello, can everybody hear me? This is Susan.
Susan, now again.
Yeah, Mike, hi. So it looks like Roland either left. Oh, here he is. He's back.
Okay.
Roland, do you want to try that again? Apologies for any whatever happened.
Sorry, some technical issues here.
Yeah.
But I'm back. Welcome, everyone. Happy New Year, everyone. And we will get started right away. And I wanted to see, before we get started, actually, if anyone in the group wanted to share any news or has any updates for the group. Hold on, let me see the, okay. Okay, well, good. All right, so with that, we normally have two presentations in our hour together. One of the folks we had planned on having today, we couldn't confirm at the last minute. So we have just one presentation, which is Michael and Catherine, the directors of the Climate Data Policy Initiative. And so we're excited to get an update from Michael and Catherine about their work in the Climate Data Policy Initiative. And yeah, we'll see. I mean, since we have a little bit more time, maybe there's going to be more time for discussion, or we'll stop a little bit early. I think we can play it by ear. So with that, Michael, are you there?
Yes. Hi, Roland. Hi, Susan. Susan, can you start the video? Sorry. Okay, here we go. Hi, and then I think Catherine will join too as well. Thanks, Roland, and thanks everybody. We're actually, and we don't want to just fill up the hour if an hour isn't to be filled. I'm mindful of both time and conciseness, but we're really excited about the opportunity to talk about what is really a burgeoning and exciting and quite important field that we're a part of, just one of many that are part of it. And we have with us as well two of our collaborators, Kevin Su and Christina Jenk, who are in their own right, real powerhouses, and it's a really exciting project that we're getting going. What I will do is we have a deck presentation, but we really do want to try to both move through that, give a sense of what we're doing and why we're doing it, but then also have a discussion and engagement, because frankly, the whole point of this is to get those insightful leaders, those folks who are, this is a cross-disciplinary attempt to try to put data into practice. So with that, I will actually jump into what I promised, which is a presentation. So, just to get started, and I think, Roland, we first talked about this a year or so ago, but I came to this as a public interest and environmental attorney. I've been doing a lot of work in legislation and in policy, and was really interested in the work that CodeX is doing in the areas of applied technology, and frankly also having to do with digital technologies like blockchain. And in the course of it, really talked about the idea of having something that looks at the gaps and the opportunities to create a integrated approach to climate data policy writ large. And part of it comes out of my experience. I had led ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability, the US chapter. It's the largest network of cities that is focused on sustainability and climate change. And in the course of doing that, both found the incredible the depth and breadth of leadership that's out there, but then also, frankly, seeing the gaps. And frankly, a lot of it is at the level of even understanding what's going on when it comes to climate. We have been developing software to measure the emissions from cities, and even that process, as with the leading mayors around the globe, was not only arduous but full of gaps and was very instructive. So taking from that inspiration and knowing obviously the urgency of the time, we decided to try to take opportunity to use Stanford's platform to be able to bring together folks around this. So that's the kind of the origin story of this initiative, and we're really just getting started. So jumping into what we wanted to frame it. Frankly, it is a massive challenge, as we all know, and in fact, it gets underscored with both successes, but also the challenges and even failures at both global and national levels that we see in the headlines. And we believe that there is ample, not just the resources are there, but also the talent, the insight, and the desire of folks, of leaders across the globe to be able to address it. We just want to help accelerate that by creating a platform to be able to look specifically at data policies around climate, because without that, these are invisible gases. These are potent, but they require some conversion into the data that we can take action on. So all this is by way of a rather obvious introduction, but what we want to look at as a focus is what are some of the core things, frameworks for climate data that need to be either developed, need to be extended, or frankly, in some cases, just need to be created. So, talking about a climate metaphor, well, the wheels, we're looking at everything from data collection, design, capture, reporting and accountability frameworks, and then incentive systems. At the end of the wheels, when we lean, frankly, and this is a bias I'll be candid about, lean towards rewards, but we understand the need to integrate sticks, and that all of this is towards driving innovation. So the goal is to be able to use this in practice. This is applied research. And one of the things we're really looking at, as I mentioned at the top, is the ability to integrate game-changing digital and next-gen technologies and blockchain, AI, ML, sensor, and all the technologies which are coming online, and we feel that can be applied to this massive challenge that we're facing in climate. But we want to also ensure that these frameworks and the technologies are designed from the jump to advance human needs. So it's not just a free-for-all, and in fact, that the outcomes are equitable and they drive sustainable development. So that's what informs our initiative to date. And then when we got started, and really where we are now is really diving into GHGs, that is the climate data associated with carbon emissions. And part of this obviously is the massive challenge of being able to have a future that's in line with a 1.5 degree C increase, which frankly, even that is going to have tremendous damage to people and planet. Given that, we still feel that there is an enormous amount of opportunity to be able to impact the global frameworks on these, and that in particular, we want to take on some of the key challenges of data fragmentation, the quality of data, and the lack of transparency. And as was highlighted as recently as the COP, and Catherine will get into this a little bit later, but the lack of transparency, the lack of consistent policy regimes lead to a great deal of cynicism, rightly so, and accurate labels of greenwashing, and that goes for both public and private sector. And part of what we're also finding, and and trying to address is the existing policy approaches have really leaned heavily on, particularly on climate finance, risk disclosure. So the concept that a bank or an investor needs to be aware of the potential risks to their assets and their investments, but not necessarily something that says the world needs to understand what you're emitting, which is they're both important, but without being able to have an actual accounting for the emissions, we don't have real possibility for accountability, both for individual and the public broadly. So that piece of it, we feel, is something that has really driven our actions going forward. So one of the things that we think with addressing a climate data infrastructure is the possibility, as I said, of having a technology framework that can deploy these different elements of a broad integrated regime to be able to have what amounts to real climate data that's comprehensive, that's integrated across the globe, that both captures public and private emissions, but then is also be able to use and inform policy and consumer behavior. And that would include a whole range of right now disconnected ways to be able to measure and accurately account for the emissions that we're seeing. So this is just a really high-level sketch. It was actually part of a piece we submitted and was published in the MIT journal a year ago. But the concept essentially is that amongst governments and the private sector, data is captured in a very siloed and often behind firewall or private way, and that even that data is incomplete. It is both across the scopes, which is something that is something that needs to be addressed immediately, but also just in terms of the global nature. So when we, hold on one second. Okay, there we go. So we've identified what we believe are key in the context of GHG data policy, what we think are key policy elements that need to be in any data policy, complete data policy approach. And that is on two fronts. One deals with data, the other deals with reporting. First of all, obviously, we need to deal with real data. That is bottoms up, not modeled. Modeled data is what drives a lot of the reporting, a lot of the understanding, and for good reason, that there isn't comprehensive real data. But until we understand exactly what's going on, who's emitting, how they're emitting it, and how different efforts at mitigation are impacting it, we won't really know accurately how to intervene and how to be able to drive reductions. Obviously, data collection is only as good as the methods of collecting. That's why bringing sensor technology, satellites, there's a whole host of new initiatives coming online. They need to be tested, they need to be checked, but there's a lot of potential for having much more accurate, verifiable data collection coming online. And then, in terms of data policy, we also, need to underscore the need for third-party verification. And this isn't that you can't do it well yourself, it's that we need to have the trust and confidence that it is what it says it is, what you are saying it is. And I think this is just a reflection of a broad public, it's just broad public view of where things are with institutions, but frankly, it also would allow for the sharing of data between private ventures that may not want to share, between national governments there may be diplomatic or other reasons they don't want to share, and frankly, a public that can point to a third party and see whether what you're saying is true. So we do think that the element of trust, third-party verification is a key element of that. And then obviously, when it's been verified, that the public has to be able to see it and be able to use that data themselves. And that's that. And you may have an inkling of where we're going with blockchain as a recording, one of the recording means for this, but you know, there are a lot of different ways that could be done, but we do think that a public recording is a critical part of a policy framework. And then, you know, obviously when we're talking about what to report, we feel it's fundamental that when it comes to greenhouse gases, that all the scopes need to be reported. And this is very insider baseball, if you will, if you're not familiar with it. So, but the scopes are ways of talking about who is responsible, essentially, what entity is responsible for the emissions of these greenhouse gases. Scope 1 is those gases which are specifically from the activity of your own operations. Scope 2 is when you purchase electricity from others. And Scope 3, which is really quite interesting, it's vastly underreported, but it's all the things in the supply chain up and downstream. So it's for a lot of corporate entities, it's actually the vast majority of their emissions, which right now is very underreported. So we also feel that in a reporting context, policy elements need to include a mandatory provision, because frankly, the current regimes have not required full reporting. And as a result, we've seen incomplete at best reporting. So unfortunately, we believe the policy regimes need to include mandatory reporting, and that really should include both public and private entities. And we'll get to some of the work we're doing to advise on that in a second. And we also feel like that all this reporting, again, needs to be transparent and publicly accessible. So when we are talking, this is that was on GHGs, just to be clear, but there is a lot more to climate, both impact and what we're trying to the ecosystem we're trying to create in the field we're trying to build relating to climate, besides simply greenhouse gas emissions, the pollutants. And you know, we feel that a climate data ecosystem, global ecosystem, needs to also incorporate data and policy to be able to understand and properly manage our water resources, all other natural resources, flora and fauna, and frankly waste, which is part of our ecosystem. We are not just GHG, but we obviously continue to produce a massive amount of waste. And if we're going to hope to be able to create real circular economies, we need to be able to have an understanding of that. So that we are looking long term at the whole climate data ecosystem as being much more comprehensive. So one of the things we're obviously trying to focus on is those infrastructure gaps, and then fundamentally, how are we going to address it? We feel it's going to be a combination of positive and negative incentives, because frankly, until there are incentives for the regular folks, consumers, all sorts of institutional entities to get engaged, then we're going to continue to suffer and deal with the what's known as the commons problem with overuse of collective resources. So one of the things for our work that we're looking at with that kind of context is how to apply this thinking. We have a lot of folks, as I said, who are already out there doing this. We're bringing and working with folks that want to use this platform and convening, and we're trying to figure out ways to have impact. I euphemistically talk about applied research here, but you know, frankly, it's like, how do you take the academic and deep research that people are doing and have policymakers and others put it into use? And I think what I feel is a very exciting opportunity are some of the things that we're seeing both in the U.S. and the EU and coming out in other nations, coming out of the COP on reporting and trying to get a handle on where we really are. not modeling, but where we are, and what we think is going to be hopefully in the next period of time, we're going to see a sea change in how reporting of climate data is dealt with. And we're seeing early efforts by the UK and New Zealand, for instance, to deal with scopes 1 and 2, mandatory requirements for certain publicly traded corporations, efforts by the SEC under Gary Gensler to have SEC rulemaking for publicly traded companies to include what's known as TCFD, the financial disclosure requirements be part of the mandatory reports to the SEC, and efforts that we've been advising on in California, for instance, on SB 260, which would be a mandatory disclosure of GHG emissions for all scopes, including a public reporting to the Secretary of State. So that these are the kind of mandatory climate accounting and reporting initiatives we think there's a great deal of hope for. We think it's going to take a lot of continued research and advising and putting together tables for people to engage on to make sure that these things get over the finish line. And then one of the things, and I'm going to hand this off to Catherine very soon, one of the things we do think is really important is not just that we're keeping track of and helping create the frameworks for accounting. It's accounting without investment, without the rewards is frankly an exercise that most folks won't want to get behind. It's about finance, and it's about the investment in those measures, which will not only reduce emissions, but it will increase sustainable growth. Will build communities in a low carbon future in a way that builds up equity in people and places. So it's the tying the accounting to finance, which we feel like there's a huge amount of opportunity. We think there's a critical gap right there, but we think that this is the way potentially to really drive this alignment of interests. So Catherine, I'm gonna hand it over to you now. I think what I'll do is move the slides, but yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like a great plan. I first just want to say, really excited to be here with everybody. And I want to also shout out to Christina and Kevin, who are also from CDPI, who are like keeping the chat going with lots of good stuff. And I'm looking forward to some of the conversation that's already been surfaced in the chat. And Scott McLeod in particular, I was like, I wish Ruben Youngbaum from CDPI was here on this call, because he's our blockchain cryptocurrency, sort of the maven. So, but we're excited to talk about all of it and to think about ways to keep the conversation going. So I get to talk about leveraging climate technology. And as Michael said, policy, we know is critically important, and we're working in a world and with a challenge that requires us to work on different levels and to recognize that climate data policy needs to leverage and incorporate technology. And we also have opportunities just to leverage technology. We know that when it comes to blockchain, DLT, sensors, IoT, AI, that they're going to be critical to filling the gap between where we are now, between our legacy systems that no matter how hard we try are not going to get us where we need to go, and the impact that we need to have. And so I'm excited to say that since CDPI started not that long ago, so much is happening in the application of these new technologies to the climate space. And so I think there's a lot for us at CDPI to keep track of as we think about developing a global network with global partners like the Open Earth Foundation. There's a whole community of people that is coming together to talk about how we can apply these technologies in the use cases of climate and other environmental challenges. So in terms of new tech, just wanted to go through a few of those, because you'll want to Google them, because I think it's exciting to see. Like we're actually in it right now. We have Climate Trace, which is using satellite to measure CO2 and methane. And you think about that, you don't really need anybody reporting if you're just going to measure it, right? So we need to also think creatively about how to rationalize our carbon accounting systems, but also how to make it much easier to just get the right data. Klima is a decentralized autonomous organization that uses the Klima token to get carbon offsets. And I'm really excited about what they're doing. So you've got the BitMo platform, which allows for the exchange of carbon credits as NFTs on the Ethereum platform. And BitMo are blockchain internationally transferred mitigation outcomes. That's a mouthful. EverCity is a digital platform for sustainable finance, and it issues using blockchain traceable assets for bonds, loans, and carbon credits. So, and lastly, Patch.io is an API-based solution that you can use for anything that embeds the carbon footprint estimation. So you can see right here, there's real stuff going on right now. And what we need to do is understand how to build the ecosystem, how to think about its implementation in a way that's going to really meet the needs of all of the folks that need to be affected by climate change. And I think Michael talked about the equity components of this, like who are the winners and losers in this work? And we want to be really focused on making lots of folks that have been outside this space part of the solution. So as we think about those technologies, of course, the ethical dimensions loom large, of course, with AI and sensors, data and privacy. That's a conversation that obviously CDPI and the Stanford community is well positioned to engage in. And then just to come together and to create opportunities for mapping and exploration and best practice. I'm now going to talk about a couple of things that we're doing that really, I think, are going to allow the Stanford community and the broader community to really roll up its sleeves on making a difference and making sure these technologies actually have the impact that they could on the things that matter most. So before I do that, I just want to say some of the other ways we've been, providing thought leadership is Ruben Youngbaum. I mentioned his name, and Mike and I wrote this report for the MIT law report about blockchain and climate. This was a little over a year ago, maybe more, and was an opportunity for us to begin to talk about, hey, where are the climate solutions? How do we engage in some of the real important issues with blockchain, including kind of the Oracle problem and some of the other aspects of blockchain technology that really need to be resolved if they're really going to be used with the kind of impact that we want. So next slide. We also, the Algorand, we just had an opportunity. CodeX is one of the partners with the Wood Center on the environment, and two of the sort of nodes of work within CodeX, CDPI and the CodeX blockchain group are both integrally involved in this proposal. It would be an opportunity. Algorand's a blockchain cryptocurrency protocol. It's a platform that supports smart contracts, and it's a consensus algorithm based on proof of stake and a Byzantine agreement protocol. And Algorand's currency is called Algo. And they have put out a major call for funding of centers of excellence across, I think it's across the globe. And we came together with the Wood Center and CodeX to put in an application, which gives us an opportunity to focus on both climate and water challenges. So the application to be a center of excellence is focused on climate and water. And we think that's going to give us a tremendous opportunity when we get this designation to really take this work to the next level. A couple of the big questions that we want to answer is, how should blockchains be designed and structured for maximum benefit to real world environmental and social systems, oracles, incentives, securities, access? And then how can blockchain with its unique technical, social, ethical, and legal characteristics be best incorporated into our complex and interconnected world? So those are our kind of two big research questions. And then there's some technology challenges. It's going to be a combination of actual connection with the various departments at Stanford and developers on blockchain, to look at enabling on-chain use of global public goods, expanding the frontiers of blockchain's relevance, and focusing on justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I'm going to actually have Christina Jank in a slide or two share her work on that. So we're really excited about this opportunity for collaboration and to leverage the Stanford community and the imprimatur and brilliance and passion for a focus on blockchain's application in this space. And then next, sort of the third sort of foundational pillar of the work that we're doing is, as Mike has already mentioned, that we're really, there is no doing this work without ensuring equitable outcomes. And so our climate policy and technology work has to be rooted in, are we actually not only reducing carbon emissions, but are we satisfying core human needs? And as we all know, we watch the global conversation around climate change. If we pit these two things against each other, we will not be successful in mobilizing the level of innovation and engagement required. So we think this is an important throughput of the work, and that when we think about this, we often think about the polluter and then the value chain and the carbon emissions associated with the polluter, instead of looking at what is the basic human needs of communities and how do we create value chains that ensure a 1.5 degree future. And in that context, a commitment to building technology and innovation ecosystems, including new approaches to carbon measurement. Consumption-based GHG accounting is another way to think about GHG accounting, which is to look at the actual consumption of goods and then to back map to a map. So there's lots of ways to think about this, but I wanted to just talk in particular about something we're excited about, and it's one aspect of this commitment to equity and sustainable development. I had the opportunity, there's a picture of me to attend Glasgow representing CDPI, and especially to speak at the launch of this UN Global Innovation Hub that is a new effort by the UNFCCC to do just what I said, which is to think about needs-based, solution-oriented innovation and climate action. And so had a chance to participate on panels, bringing in some of the work we've been doing on GHG accounting, and to also think more broadly about how do we then become part of a do different in climate design, policy, and technology. And so have an opportunity for ongoing collaboration. I think that there's a lot that can be done. And I think Stanford is perfectly well situated and has an obligation to be a leader when it comes to thinking about climate action and the sustainable development goals, and have an opportunity to play an advisory role for the Innovation Hub. So hoping and excited to bring both the work that's happening globally to Stanford and vice versa. Next slide, please. So that's just a little bit about what we're doing. I would, before we move on to kind of the last slides, let Christina, who has, we're really excited to have part of the CDPI collaborator ecosystem, who's brought so much to this work in a short period of time, but I'd love to have you talk a little bit about the Algorand proposal and your thoughts about justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion and in the work that we're going to do.
Hi, I'm Christina. I'm happy to start my video, but it says the host has stopped doing that, so I can't share my video. I'm really excited to partner with CDPI and bring my expertise. And okay, great, I can start my video. Hi, I'm Christina. I am a PhD economist, formerly trained in labor economics, development economics, but my journey has led me also into the political economy of a lot of these outcomes, and also thinking about the political economy of data. I have some work looking at how census data is produced in China, for example, and sort of pointing out the political economy considerations of that. I am, well, very comfortable thinking about markets, capitalism, and investment, but also as an economist, I want to think about how to solve collective action problems. I'm also personally committed to thinking about justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion issues within a framework of incentives and collective action problems. And so this is why I'm really excited to collaborate with the CDPI and think about it. I helped give my input on this proposal, and through my personal and professional journey, I do believe that we need to shift our thinking about how processes, like solutions that incorporate JEDI concerns. I think the solution is actually about thinking about the process, not just the metrics. The process of including important underrepresented perspectives that directly link to the SDG outcomes of health, nutrition, welfare, justice, that sort of thing. And so when I worked on the proposal, I was really emphasizing process metrics and thinking about including underrepresented voices, communities, women, Indigenous, when designing solutions. And so that's generally where I am right now. I understand the appeal of metrics and KPIs, and I want to say that some of the metrics should be process metrics when thinking about building solutions that are concerned, that are going to speak to issues of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. That's just very briefly my take on it, and happy to engage more with others and meet others in the community. I've dropped my contact in the chat.
Thanks, Christina. Appreciate it. And hopefully we'll get Kevin in the chat later as well. But thanks so much. And just before we close out, just want to say, and this is evidence of it, that we want to build a community of folks that bring in all kinds of assets and perspectives and passion and brilliance. And so that is really the ethos of our work at CDPI, is creating a space for people to collaborate. Some of the things that we talked about, but there's also a range of other things that people work on. And Tony Lai in particular does so much thought leadership in this space. And we're, really grateful to have him part of this work as well. We also are, partnering not only inside but outside of Stanford, and as you've seen, showcasing innovation and creating high value resources and participating in convenings and dialogue. So with that, Mike, do you want to just take us to the end of this deck? You're muted.
That might not be a bad thing, but no, we will move. I think it's time to move to the discussion, but we did want to emphasize, some of the things we've done already, bringing together convenings in the era of COVID, through the early days of Zoom, bringing together global leaders to talk about how to drive carbon emissions down with data policy initiatives, ways that you can take different approaches. We had our good friends and not competitors at Berkeley Center for Law and Energy and the Environment, and also Alicia Seeger from the Steyer-Taylor Center for Energy Policy and Finance at Stanford come together for really rich conversation about how to get these things off the ground. That's the kind of stuff we look to continue to do. I think as I want to emphasize, this is just a starting point, but we already have a really incredible group of collaborators, and hopefully many more will be joining. The goal is, as Christina has mentioned, to help build the field and really have this it's not just decentralized, but it's bottom up, and it's including voices from across the spectrum, across the world, because the challenge is that big, and the solutions need to reflect all those collective insights. So we are looking for folks to engage. We're looking for folks who want to help find answers, but raise questions, and we're looking for ways to help expand this discussion. So that's really the call. And you can reach out to us, go to the site, reach out, obviously, to Christina and Kevin on this call, but anyone else you find, and let's get engaged, because the goal is we have to build a movement. It's imperative. So I will stop talking and open it up and invite both. I have not been following the chat, but I invite folks who have been to jump in. I don't know whether Kevin, you wanted to jump in at this point at all. I know I see Bruce has his hand up. I will stop sharing screen and we can just be all virtually engaging via camera.
Can I, Mike? Can I
Please,
ask you to clarify just a little bit more?
Yes.
I think it sounds like there's a lot of things going on and a lot of great ambition. When you started out, I was under the impression that there's a shortage of good data, and we want to create some resource to share good data. So my question relates to these national efforts and agencies like the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which is tasked with tracking data, GHG data. How do we relate to them? What's our role there? And then I thought, well, maybe it's about tracking the policies, in different countries and creating a resource that tracks the policies and laws that different countries have. And then more towards the end of your presentation, I was more under the impression, well, this is more about sort of being a platform and a forum for thought leadership and talk about climate change policy and how to optimize climate change policy. So it's a little bit, I realize there's a lot of ambition and a lot of different people with different talents involved, but for this initiative, what's the first use case? What's the first thing, the first number one milestone we want to reach before we get to the next thing?
A great question. You accurately reflect the nature of the global data commons, if you will, in this. There are a couple of different fundamental challenges, I think, that have to be addressed, and it's the question is how we're going to be able to do that. When it comes to national data, the nationally determined contributions that to the UNFCCC, each nation has come to, those are all voluntary. They're all based on individual national reporting, and you have challenges in that of whether you're getting all the data from that country and whether the data you're seeing is accurate or not. So that's one of those challenges. And so there's an effort to try to for instance, Angel Sue, who we collaborate with as well, has been looking at like the nature of the reporting through the UNFCCC as just one piece of it. But then the question of tracking data, as you point out, Roland, it's like, it is a question of, are we getting accurate emissions data, which you can get from satellites, which you can't get from sensors, but you can't get attributional data from, like, is it Stanford Law School? Is it Hewlett Packard? Is it, the plant down the road? You can't, unless you get the actual data from those entities, there's no way to confirm the emissions are coming from them. So then it becomes a data reporting and data policy question. So there are different elements of that. So, because you can have great satellites, and this is without even getting into the fundamental questions about, who's tracking and what are they capturing, when it comes to data surveillance. It is attributional. So that's another piece of it. And then, quite rightly, you're right, there's a lot of different points of entry and a lot of different questions people are trying to answer. So we do see the need and opportunity for a convening role. And I think that's where you're getting a sense of, part of it is like, people are coming in and we're meeting new folks, and there are new opportunities to be able to move the needle. I think fundamentally we are looking at GHG emissions data as a first step, but quite quickly folks have identified SDGs, the kind of comprehensive approach to deal with sustainable development as a human-centered and planet-centered approach as something that needs to be addressed part and parcel with this. So I'll stop. Catherine, Christina,
Got it.
others.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
I think it would be great just to let Bruce and I'd see we had Arnon Rosenthal, Bruce Kahane, and earlier on Scott McLeod. So I think each of them should also just share. And certainly there's lots of folks with their own expertise on this call. So let's just let that happen. Maybe Bruce first, of course, his hands up.
So I can't undo my video, but it's great, Michael and Catherine and the others. This cacophony, this Tower of Babel that's been created for all the right reasons with zeal, and it's something that data science can resolve if it wants to, or it can fester it. And I think it goes back a little bit to Roland's point, which is, if the point of this exercise through CodeX is to say, on the one hand, there's a lot of legal requirements for disclosure, and there will be more. On the other hand, there's a marketplace in which the data that those requirements feed into could develop new products, including financial products or insurance products. If it's the bridging function as lawyers, and Mike, I never knew you were part of ICLEI. I intersected with ICLEI years ago.
Really?
Suffice it to say that Government Finance Officers Association and the U.S. Treasury that has to bail out the cities when they can't afford to comply with federal mandates, everybody's got a stake in simplifying this babble.
Yeah.
So I think mapping the babble is a function that would be valuable, as opposed to creating a new layer of babblosity. The second thing is I would talk to folks in the accounting department of the GSB, because they're the ones who are training the bankers and the corporate finance officers to account in old versions of accounting, including without the disclosure that we're talking about. And then the third thing is, because I have been a bond lawyer, municipal bond lawyer, there's a huge opportunity to simplify how the rating services get the data to apply a rating or to experiment with the market's appetite for a rating that's distinct from the sell side version of creating new financial products that have their own discontinuity and non-credibility. I teach Understanding Wall Street this quarter. We have 115 students from all over campus, and we'll be bringing, we were supposed to have the head of sustainability for CalPERS this Monday, but she had a family issue. She'll come back, and we'll probably have somebody from Goldman Sachs's sustainable finance team. So I think explaining how to use the data to improve your credit standing so that you can afford to borrow to invest in the things that get you a better rating, all of that from an academic point of view would be useful, because you're not trying to sell a product. And Alicia, God bless her, in Seeger, this is more than just climate. This is about how people live. I think it was to Catherine's point, Christina's point rather, that you're actually trying to improve indigenous communities with this.
Right.
And one final thing I'll say, and then I will shut up, is that the SDGs have no financial credibility. No one that I know of is budgeting to spend on SDGs. The developing countries are using the SDGs as a new form of asking for external budget support from philanthropists and multinats. So until the SDGs have financial credibility, it's not worth talking about.
Can I respond to that?
Sure. Yeah.
No, I think that I recognize that I may not fully understand the context that Bruce is referring to, but I think what I do want to say is that I think a lot about geopolitical context and geopolitical competition as someone who has been researching the Chinese economy and political economy. And I think that there seems to be a growing global competition for influence through infrastructure in developing countries. And I think the role of being able to move on SDGs for building infrastructure in developing countries could be a way to move forward.
Thanks, Christina. Appreciate
Christina,
that.
I'd love to talk to you about this from my study of Fiji and Indonesia and how.
Yeah, and I speak as a Taiwanese person who has been studying the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative.
Okay. So yeah, we could have a great conversation about the pronouncements of SDG and the lack of budgeting for SDG, but I'll go on.
Thanks so much, Bruce. Mike, I want to let Arne in. I want to make sure we only have a few minutes left.
Yeah, please. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't see your hand.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't been able to figure out how to raise the hand.
Right.
But I'm a very experienced data guy. I've watched many strategies within enterprises, including large ones like DoD, and also among communities. And I guess the strongest lesson I can say is, do not bet on the Babel being resolved. It will not happen. If you look at the reasons for the heterogeneity, it's legacy systems, it's that there are external players. Climate needs a lot of data from community, from people who do not consider themselves part of the climate community. And there's a variety of other reasons I could list for why the Babel hasn't, why I know of no large enterprise which has a lot more leverage than an idealistic community has, and yet they have not been able to eliminate their internal Babel, let alone worldwide Babel.
Yeah.
So look instead to how do you reduce some of the Babel locally and make progress in the presence of Babel, because you're not going to get rid of it. Over.
Those remarks resonate with me, Arne. And working with even like with ICLEI, as I mentioned, you'd be working with some of the leading mayors out there, really named champions that you could think of, the cities that were doing the most. And within that, there would be 7 or 8 departments with 7 or 8 different servers, with 7 or 8 different ways of doing data collection. And literally you would take them a year to roll up their data just for that leading climate champion city, a year to be able to roll up their inventory, not their action plan or how they've been doing against it. So I totally get both the silo, the questions of bureaucracy and the kind of challenges that we face within an institution, and not to mention between institutions. But I think then when you look at, and this is where, maybe we're looking ahead, hopefully, but when you look at the alignment of incentives through new digital finance to be able to reward integration of data collection for certain outcomes, there are potential ways that are new to the world that could be deployed, and obviously those things had to be tested, and there's a lot of there's a lot of traps to look out for. I totally get that. So having said that, there's a lot of people. Go ahead. Sorry.
I applaud your concentration on incentives. I think that is the best way. But don't forget, you're not the only one who's setting incentives. There are a lot of other people setting conflicting incentives. And because of that, there will continue to be Babel. For most
No doubt.
organizations, their local needs are more important than interoperability.
Totally. And I would only say, I totally agree. And that's why I think as a favorite term of the new digital language, signal to noise, that's what we're hoping for. We couldn't imagine having a unified, harmonized, Babel-free society, but certainly more signal, less noise, or at least being able to break through the noise. Christina, you had a point on this. I'm guessing.
Oh,
No.
I just wanted to say there's like a whole field of economics that models incentives for signal and noise and agents and stuff. And
See, there we go. Christina's about to go.
I just want to say that the way I think about it, there are many agents who benefit from Babel and producing noise. So we need to think about that when thinking about this problem.
All right. I love that. I love that.
Don't forget what to you is noise is meeting somebody else's goal.
Yes.
So you can't be pejorative about it. You should track the incentives and
Fair point.
Start small. Like if you want more accurate data, the first thing to do probably, and maybe feasible, is agree on how you will describe accuracy. How do you define it? How do you measure it? And things like that. And even that's difficult.
Fair points. Kevin,
Mike,
you have your hand up before. Sorry.
Well, I know that Kevin, I want to let him say something, but I also see Roland. He needs to close this out.
Sorry.
So we're gonna.
Yeah, maybe we let Kevin have the last question.
Yeah. And I do want to just say that Scott McLeod, I feel bad that we didn't get you live on this. We'll find you offline. Kevin?
Great.
Sorry, folks. While Kevin's going, can the presenters drop your emails into chat? And that way anybody who wants to reach you can be directly in touch. Thanks.
Yes.
Yeah, I think
sorry, Kevin.
All good. Yeah, the discussion went definitely in interesting directions and kind of moved between different scales. And so I just thought a few quick things. Would love to kind of chat more with folks and for future discussion. One scale that was brought up was kind of moving down from national to maybe like corporations. And I think within the corporate world, there are robust frameworks for estimating institutional emissions, but then there also are like business models where people are saying, we want to help you with reducing emissions. And so how do we think about that systematically? How do you put those types of transactions together? Is it different if you're in a cap and trade regime versus a carbon tax or a carbon fee and dividend regime? Like, and how do we do things like guarantee savings or share savings? You know, how does that come into this conversation? Since some folks brought up kind of crypto issues, and I think there's a lot of discussion about proof of work and how much energy that's consuming. And then just mining more broadly. I think there's a lot of interest around pushing renewable energy for mining. And right now, they're doing like surveys to figure out, well, who's using renewable energy for your mining, but how do you verify this? I know that Filecoin has a new tool that's supposed to kind of support this transition to kind of say, like, are we actually matching RECs with actual mining behavior? So that's another whole area where lots more could be talked about. And I think could tap on people's expertise in this room. And then kind of a third area that I thought was promising that was brought up was around the financing. And if we kind of scope out that space around things like green bonds or sustainability linked loans, and then kind of tie that more to verifiable emissions, I think especially at the municipal level and how you think about cities funding projects, there's a lot of movement around nations and how they fund projects, but I think cities, because they're contributing so much to the kind of global share of emissions, are an interesting case to think about how we fund and verify projects at that level. So look forward to the conversation with more of y'all afterwards.
That's great.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Roland.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I think this was it was a great start of a larger conversation. I mean, you've been, having this conversation for some time, but I appreciate you sharing it with the group and making some new connections. And we're looking forward to your next update and news from your group. And hopefully you'll be connecting with some folks in this group who will become involved in this effort. So thank you so much for this update, Michael and Catherine and Christina. Really appreciate it. Kevin also thanks. And And yeah, thank you all for joining us today. This was a great way to kick off our group meetings. We'll be meeting again next week. Susan, I don't know if you know already what we're gonna.
Yeah, I believe there is one presenter so far, but stay tuned. And if I recall correctly, they are from the Duke Law Technology cohort, another great presenter from that cohort that we've been very fortunate to have this past fall. So we'll look forward to another presentation soon.
Yeah, so we'll send out an announcement early next week. And good to see you all, and see you soon. Thank you all. Have a good rest of your week.